Welcome back, guys. As you can see, we've got all the equipment out here today. And now that our brass has officially been deprimed, sized, and cleaned, as you can see here, they're looking good. We are officially ready to begin the next stage in the reloading process, which is case mouth expansion and priming. Stay tuned, we're going to get started. If you like this video and the content we put out here at the Reloading Craft channel, please give this video a thumbs up. As a growing YouTube channel, it definitely helps us out and lets the YouTube algorithm know that viewers are enjoying my content. While there's definitely more than one way to do this, I like to start out by getting my case mouth expansion exactly right before I introduce any primers or powder into the system. To do this, you're going to need to take your die set. In this case, we're going to be loading 45 ACP. Open the die set, and most pistol die sets will come with an expander. You'll be able to recognize it. Normal straight wall die, it's nothing special on the outside, but if you look up in, there's going to be a larger plug in the center of the die. This is what goes down into the case to open up. Next, we're going to, you can see there the lock ring on that one is tight. I'm going to take this hex key here, back that set screw out just a touch. In the case of these reddings, they use a little piece of lead shot down under there, and in order to dislodge it, since this die has already been locked down, I need to just gently tap it on a piece of wood. Be right back. And I just gently tapped it on a piece of wood, and now you can see that lock ring spins nice and freely. We're also going to back the expander plug out the top, and then start it in the top of the press. Okay, got it threaded down here. We have our correct shell holder in this case for 45. I'm going to take first piece of brass, set it in there, and raise the ram to the top of the stroke. Now, I'm going to thread this die in. Okay, it bottomed out right there. Taking a look at it, I can see that the bottom of the die has bottomed out on the shell holder. That is fine. Adjust it a little bit more just so we have nice consistency right about there. And then twist down the lock ring. Lock ring is snug, and I'm going to grab this hex key in the case of these reddings. Stick that in the set screw and tighten it down. Unlike the Lees, which we demonstrated last week, these do not utilize a rubber O-ring. Instead, simply they use that set screw, and you have to just snug them down against the top of your press. Okay, and there is snug. I'm going to kind of make a little bit of a reference mark here with my finger just so I can see where that's lined up. Back it off slightly, and then snug it down some more. That's nice and secure. Twist that back down. And our expander die, the die body, is now in position. For this next part, let me put this hex key back here. For this next part, you're going to need one of the projectiles that you're going to be loading. In this case, it's a 230 grain Missouri Bullet Company softball GL. These are hardened to 18 Brenell, sized of .452 diameter. And this is the one, I should back up. When you're setting up your expander die, all you need to do is expand the case enough to start the projectile in the top. Right now, if I take one of these cases out of the loading block, you can see I can almost, but not quite get that case to accept this bullet. Expanding is going to open it up slightly and allow us to get this started. So now, I'm just going to thread this down. I can feel it met some resistance right there. I'm going to lower the ram. And this will go down inside the case, so I turned it down about a full turn. Run it, and now we check it. Again, it's close, but there's some wobble there. And this part is trial and error. Some people expand a lot, some people barely expand at all. I do just enough to allow this projectile to see into the case. Typically, these expanders use 2 steps. The first step goes down in the case and just sizes it a couple thousandths underneath the bullet diameter. The second step, towards the top of the expander plug, actually flares the neck open. when we get close to that, that's why I got to be careful not to overexpand. I'm just visually watching it here. All right, there, I felt that. Let's see if we can get this on camera. That neck now has a slight bevel to it, and it'll easily accept that projectile. I'll hold this in place, tighten this little top lock ring down. That one's now expanded. I'm going to set that to the side. And just repeat this with one other case just to validate it. Everything up top is tight. That's expanded open. So it looks like you go just a tiny bit more. Let's try that. And that's perfect. It's enough to just allow this to start into the case. It's exactly what we want. Final test. Third piece of brass. Perfect. Alrighty. Set the projectile to the side, and our expander die is now set up. Whenever you thread this out of the press and then thread it back in, because this lock ring is officially locked to the die body itself, this setting will be retained. With our expander die now set up, dialed in, and calibrated for these cases and projectiles we're going to be using, it is now time to get on to the actual case expansion and priming process. With this press currently, it uses an onboard slide bar priming type system, although other presses may use a tilting priming block, or if you're priming off press, that would be done separately in a different stage as you choose. In order to prime your brass as you're expanding the mouth of the cases, it is important to have a continuous supply of primers on hand and available for your press to feed, provided you're doing on-press priming. In this case, I just noticed that my Big Boss 2 here has run out of primers, as evidenced by the fact that my primer weighted rod has officially filled up this entire tube and locked up the little arm here on the bottom. So what do? Well, it's now time to refill our primers. Assuming you haven't done this before, you've never seen this done. Standard sleeve of primers here is going to have 100 primers per sleeve. We're going to use this RCBS primer tray. I think this is the second iteration of it, which is going to have a smooth side and a ribbed side. What you want to do is open this up and take the rib side. Open your sleeve of primers here, like so. Be careful not to spill any. And lay that upside down top of those primers. Flip that over, and now pick up on the empty primer tray. Set that to the side. If you're only loading 25, 50, however many primers, you don't need to do obviously the whole sleeve unless you want to. In this case, I'm going to be loading more than 100, so we're going to load the whole sleeve. Next, you'll just shake it slightly side to side, and the ridges built into this tray will actually catch on the sharp edges of the primer and flip them over so that they all end up oriented this way. Then you'll take the lid, put that on, and flip this upside down. In this case, I'm going to set it down on the bench and lift off that bottom. Now these are ready to be picked up and loaded into our primer pickup tube. I've actually used this tube, which is off of a Dillon 750 press, to make it easier to fill the tube that's built into the press. I like to kind of shake them out here so there's a little bit of space in between them. And then we're just going to go in here and pick up each primer. Now when you do this, you'll note that I have one primer still stuck up here in the top. You can either press that down with your finger. In this case, that went in and slid right down. Or if it sticks, you can use the weighted rod you use to hold down your primer stack. Gently set that in the end and just push it down to make sure it's not being held in the end. We take out our weighted rod, set that to the side like we did there. And then moving up to the press, that primer fill tube. You'll note the little cotter pin here. We're going to set that right over the top of this fill tube. Make sure those are nicely lined up and pull that cotter pin. You can see there that stack of primers wanting to drop down in. Slide it over to line it up. and down they go. I'll take my thumb, put my thumb over this when I take it out, look through it, in which case you can see, I can line it up here for the camera. You can see light down through the other end, so we know this tube is empty. Set that to the side, and then take our weighted rod, which happens to have a 45 case on the end for extra weight. Set that in, and allow that to rest down on top of the stack of primers. That just ensures they feed reliably. After that, we can move back down to the press. Close up our primer tray and set that to the side. Grab our box cases, our bin of cases, and we're back in business. With our primer tube loaded, it's now time for priming and case mouth expansion. Make extra sure all your die components are snugged down. And in the case of this Redding, which has the slide bar priming system here, I'll pull back on the little ball, which will deposit a primer into the end of this little primer cup. Turn this sideways here. Okay. I'll start by grabbing a fresh case, sliding it in, expanding it, and at this time I'd pull back on that little ball, running it down, and pushing forward on that lever. This primes the case. Repeating that again. Stick that in, raise the ram, pull back on the little priming ball, run forward, and prime the case. One thing to make especially sure of when you're priming is that the primer itself is beneath flush on the end of this case. If it's sticking out beyond the base of the head of the case here, it could cause issues. And last one. And there it is. This setup may vary slightly depending on the model of press you have and the method you choose for priming. I also highly recommend the use of proper eye protection, as primers are reactive components, as well as proper hearing protection, especially if you are reloading anywhere indoors. As I mentioned previously, exact setup on your press might be a little bit different, so I'd recommend checking out some YouTube videos specific to the press you are using or hand priming system if you're doing it that way. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment section down below, and I'll do my best to get back to those in a timely manner. Stay tuned for next week's video, in which we're going to be covering powder charging and how to do a proper load workup and find the load that is ideal for you. Thanks as always for watching. If you enjoyed the content we put out here, go ahead, hit the like button, click the subscribe button, and don't forget to click that little notification bell next to it so you don't miss any of our future videos. And as always, keep on reloading.